Good morning, everyone. Welcome to my morning musings. My name is Don K. Preston. I am the president of Preterist Research Institute of Ardmore, Oklahoma. Welcome to this time as I share a cup of coffee with you and share some thoughts. And this morning, I'd like to address the situation that's currently fomenting in the Middle East concerning Syria. You know, my dispensational friends keep a very close eye on the Middle East, and every time something begins to happen, they immediately point to it as the fulfillment of prophecy. And with all of the disturbances and political turmoil, military violence in Syria, it is being repeatedly claimed we are about to see the fulfillment of Isaiah chapter 17. Now, Isaiah chapter 17 foretold the destruction of Damascus, which was, of course, the capital city of Syria. And we are told, look, this has never been fulfilled. Therefore, look at what's happening today. It must be time for the fulfillment of Isaiah chapter 17. We're in the last days. Well, pardon me. You know, it's really unfortunate, in my opinion, and I want to be just as kind as possible. It's unfortunate that people have a tendency, and especially the televangelist, to just keep people in a state of excitement all of the time. And they'll run to a passage such as Isaiah 17, and they will say, look, this predicted the destruction of Damascus. And without being good students of history, without being good students of the Bible, they will say, oh, look, this has never happened. Therefore, what's happening now must be the fulfillment. Now, first of all, we have to make this observation. Isaiah chapter 17 does not say in the last days Damascus will be destroyed. Now, since Isaiah chapter 17 doesn't posit itself in the context of the last days, then it certainly seems, you know, without warrant to claim that it applies to the last days. Secondly, I want you to notice that in Isaiah chapter 17, it said that this city would be turned into a heap. And it says, in that day it shall come to pass that the glory of Jacob will wane and the fatness of his flesh grow lean. And, you know, everything that we read here in Isaiah chapter 17 agrees perfectly with what actually historically happened in 2 Kings chapter 16. Now here's the situation of 2 Kings. 2 Kings, of course, is set during the period of the divided kingdom. Ahaz is the king of Judah. And what you have is that Rezin, the king of Syria, i.e. Damascus, and then Pekah, the king of the 10 northern tribes, pardon me, come together in a union to attack Jerusalem. Well, thankfully that attack was not successful. But then, notice what happens. 2 Kings 16, verse 7. So Ahaz, this is the king of Jerusalem, sent messages to Tiglath-Pileser, king of Assyria. Now you have to keep in mind Syria and Assyria were two totally different entities, two totally different kingdoms. So you have Rezin, king of Syria, i.e. Damascus, and now Ahaz is sending messengers to Tiglath-Pileser of Assyria, saying, I am your servant and your son. Come up and save me from the hand of the king of Syria, and from the hand of the king of Israel who rise against me. And Ahaz took the silver and the gold that was found in the house of the Lord, and in the treasuries of the king's house, sent it as a present to the king of Assyria. So the king of Assyria heeded him, for the king of Assyria went up against Damascus, and took it, and carried its people captive, and killed Rezin, who of course was the king of Damascus. Furthermore, what's really, really interesting is that we come forward a couple of hundred years and we find Jeremiah 49, pardon me, Jeremiah 49, verses 24 and following, saying and looking back on the demise of Damascus, and oh, by the way, saying she was about to be destroyed again. At this time, not at the hand of the Assyrians, but this time at the hand of the Chaldeans. And of course, by the way, we have historical record of that. So in 732 BC, under Tiglath-Pileser, the Assyrians destroyed Damascus. She was so weakened, so desolated, that over 200 years later, she was not even a force to be reckoned with. And so the Chaldeans came in and destroyed her again. Now, something to keep in mind, folks, is that when the Scripture talks about the destruction of a nation of a given time and says she will be destroyed, the focus is on that kingdom that existed at that time. That is the focus. In other words, when we find the prediction in Jeremiah or in Isaiah of the destruction of whether it be Damascus or Tyre or Sidon, it is dealing with a city that at that time was a thorn in the flesh of Israel, as is clear from 2 Kings chapter 16. So the promise that they would be destroyed is simply a promise that the kingdom that was her adversary, Israel's adversary at that time, would not be her adversary anymore at that time. Does it mean that she would never rise ever again? That's not the point. The point is, the kingdom that was at that moment, at that time, Israel's opponent, would be destroyed. That is exactly what happened in 2 Kings chapter 16. That is exactly what was happening in Jeremiah 49. So, when people start pointing to Isaiah chapter 17, saying, oh, it's never destroyed, it has to be destroyed today. Number one, they're overlooking the fact that Isaiah 17 is not a messianic prophecy. It's not a last days prophecy. They're overlooking the fact that Tiglath-Pileser, the Assyrian king, did in fact destroy Damascus very shortly after the writing of Isaiah chapter 17. Damascus was destroyed in 732 BC. Then, 200 years later, as Damascus had somewhat revived and was once again being a force against Jerusalem, guess what? The Lord used the Babylonians to destroy her again. So to say that Damascus has never been destroyed is simply not historical fact. There is no reason, no textual justification for taking the promise of Jeremiah, of Isaiah 17, bringing it forward 3,000 years almost, and saying, oh, it must apply to what's going on in Syria and Damascus in 2012. Hey, thanks for the question to the viewers who have asked me to address this. Feel free, if you would like for me to address something here on my morning musings, send me an email, okay? Be glad to hear from you. Go to my websites, www.eschatology.org or www.bibleprophecy.com. Send me an email. I'd love to hear from you. You know, even if you disagree with me, love to hear from you. Thanks again for joining me for this morning's musings. We'll see you on the flip side.